Hi guys, welcome to Shade 3 Roadside Repairs channel. Today I'm fighting with the very common oil leakage on this engine. This is BMW 330 XD X-Drive M57 3 liters diesel engine. I mounted the intake manifold and as you can see, oil, is everywhere here. Everything is oily. And glow plug relay is also oily, and even there on the transmission there is also oil. All that oil comes from intake manifold and it comes from swirl flaps. So as you can see, swirl flaps are all oily. Each of them actually, they are all oily. Regarding swirl flaps, I decided to remove them, get rid of them, just because there is no way to replace them. You need to buy a new intake manifold and it is expensive, and also swirl flaps can leak. So I cleaned, one swirl flap, and as you can see here, this place, the gasket there, the seal there is not good anymore and it leaks from here, and I think the same will happen with any swirl flap, so it is just by design like this. As you can see, blanking plate, it fits perfectly, works perfectly here. So a couple of words about swirl flaps. So as you can see, there are two channels. This channel, it goes through the engine valve cover, and this channel. So there are two intake valves, and one this one and another one that one. So this channel, it doesn't have any swirl flaps, and it goes directly to the engine head, and it's called, I think, swirl intake runner. And this one, it is tangential intake runner, and it has swirl flaps. So on low RPM, or when car is idling, on low RPM, I think probably it's below 2k RPM, something like this. So those swirl flaps, they're closed, and if they're closed or kind of partially closed, I think they're just closed. In this case, air goes mostly or only through the swirl channel, and just because only one valve it is used to fill the cylinder with air, it creates kind of swirl in the cylinder, which improves mixture. So on high load, this channel gets opened and air goes through the two valves, and this kind of swirl, it's not created in this case, but on high RPM, engine needs more air, and it's not a problem for the higher RPM. So it's done mostly for emissions. However, as a side effect, it also increases, torque and fuel economy. So actually, swirl flaps, it is a good thing, but risk of having them here, it is a lot higher than the benefits. I will be saying a lot of that during the video, but my general approach is that I'm going to use different kind of solvents, hydrocarbons and stuff like that. So here you see what I'm actually going to do to clean most of the stuff. Not only this, but this is kind of the main thing. I'm going to use carb cleaner, as you can see, e-jar cleaner, and also brake cleaner to clean intake manifold, and also e-jar valve and throttle valve. I will use also power brake cleaner from Moly, but I don't have the can at this point, but it contains pretty much similar stuff to this brake cleaner. Okay, the main question is basically, is it safe? Is it safe to use to clean different parts of your engine? And I will explain my approach. So the short and general answer is yes, it is safe if exposure is short. One important note: do not use chlorinated hydrocarbons, chlorinated solvents. to clean any plastic parts. So in my case, as you can see, this is brake cleaner, and the same is applicable for, you know, each jar cleaner, carb cleaner that I'm going to use. So as you can see, it is highly flammable and it doesn't contain chlorinated hydrocarbons. So usually or generally, brake cleaners and any other kind of cleaners, you know, which contain chlorinated hydrocarbons, they are non-flammable. So if you see non-flammable carb cleaner or brake cleaner, it is kind of warning for you. Do not use it for cleaning plastic parts. So be careful. Chlorinated hydrocarbons are dangerous for your plastic, so keep that in mind. I am not going to use chlorinated hydrocarbons. Let's dig into chemical, you know, side of the question and discuss materials a bit from a very high level perspective. So important thing, the temperature outside in my room is 15 degrees Celsius. It is better when the temperature is lower, just because if a particular, you know, chemical is dangerous for a material, it will be likely less dangerous if the temperature is lower. So what I'm going to use? I'm going to use acetone/ATF mix 50/50 or 80/50. And in addition to that, Liqui Moly diesel intake cleaner to clean the intake manifold. It contains mostly acetone and something else. I will say about this a bit later. And also what I already, you know, showed to you, Motip carb cleaner, Motip jar cleaner. They are very similar. As you can see, the main ingredients here is xylene, butanone, propanol, and you know, other stuff like hydrocarbons, C6, C7, alkanes, isoalkanes, cyclics, and hexane. Also, I'm going to use brake cleaners. You know, Motip brake cleaner is aliphatic hydrocarbons, and Bardal is, you know, again similar partially to each jar cleaner. Hydrocarbons, alkanes, isoalkanes, and stuff like that. However, it contains more than 30% of aliphatic hydrocarbons. Why is it important? Just because now we can, you know, very briefly discuss, you know, chemical resistance of various materials. So intake manifold and valve cover is made from nylon 6 or PA6. It is very resistant to many of hydrocarbons. For instance, it is resistant to aliphatic hydrocarbons. It means that you can use brake cleaner, you know, without any kind of issues, right? It is resistant to alkanes, isoalkanes, cyclics, and also it is resistant to butanone and propanol, and it kind of partially resistant, or it has good resistance to xylene. It is, by the way, aromatic hydrocarbon. It has good resistance, temperature affects it, and short exposure is definitely okay here. Acetone, it is either good or excellent resistance. It is what I found in different sources, so probably depends on the, you know, nylon, but it's kind of, you know, for short exposure, again, it is okay. And hexane, it has good resistance, so again, short exposure is okay. So that being said, if you expose, you know, your intake manifold or valve cover shortly to any of that stuff, it is going to be okay. But by short exposure, I mean exposure, let's say, less than 1 hour. So for instance, if you know, put some carb cleaner for 10 minutes and after that you cleaned it with water, nothing is going to happen, nothing bad is going to happen. However, it could change color, for instance, depending on your, you know, on your chemicals. So before usage, check very carefully what is written on the can. After that, Google the chemical, you know, chart, chemical resistance chart, and decide. Okay, so it's kind of safe for valve cover and intake manifold, and valve cover gasket. It is very important. In short, do not expose it to solvents, hydrocarbons, and that stuff. However, as you can see, it is likely FKM or FPM rubber, and unlikely it is NBR. Probably this aftermarket gasket in your case, I'm not sure. But FKM, again, it is pretty resistant to many of hydrocarbons, alkanes, propanol, and it is also resistant to xylene and hexane. It could, you know, it could swell a bit but it's not a big deal, you know. So that being said, if exposure is short to stuff from here, it is kind of okay, but keep in mind that FPM is not resistant to acetone or, you know, butanol. So for instance, Moly carb cleaner could potentially damage it, even if exposure is short. However, if exposure is very short and the amount is, you know, not so big, it is going to be okay. So try to avoid, you know, the exposure to carb cleaner, and try to avoid exposure to acetone. However, Liqui Moly diesel intake cleaner, it contains acetone, and Liqui Moly says that you can, you know, basically spray it to the intake, so it means that very short exposure, they consider it as, you know, not dangerous exposure. But keep that in mind. And if it is NBR, which is unlikely, it has, you know, moderate or bad resistance to butanol and is not resistant to xylene. So that being said, very short, you know, exposure, it is okay, but avoid it. So do not expose, you know, valve cover gasket to stuff like that. And also, since we are talking about engine bay area, you know, potentially you can expose a bit, you know, coolant pipe, which is likely nylon 6 or AHD polyethylene, or coolant hose, which is likely EPDM or probably silicone if it's aftermarket or something. Vacuum hose, it is likely AEM, you know, kind of rubber, or EPDM or silicone. It depends, you know. And wire isolation, you know, some plastic holders and stuff like that, it is, again, it could be HDPE, you know, high density polyethylene, I think, or PVC, which is unlikely. So do not expose it, but again, very short exposure is kind of acceptable. If you are interested in this, Google it, you know, kind of deeply. For instance, acetone could damage silicone, but short exposure is okay, and EPDM rubber is resistant to acetone. So it depends. And again, xylene is not going to damage EPDM rubber as far as I remember. However, it is dangerous for silicone as far as I remember. So double check that, but in short, avoid any exposure. But again, if it is a couple of drops, it is kind of okay. And again, if you use brake cleaner, for instance, which is aliphatic hydrocarbons, it is likely not so dangerous. So keep that in mind. What we can kind of conclude is that brake cleaner is likely okay, you know, even if you spray directly, if exposure is short. Carb cleaner, jar cleaner is kind of, it's kind of, you know, heavier chemicals, so be careful with them. Same with acetone. But again, the short exposure is okay, and it is the key, you know, if you want to be safe. It is a very big topic, and you know, we can't dig into that in such, you know, small amount of time, but I just did that to kind of give you a perspective. So the main thing is that read what's written on the can, Google resistance to the material which you are going to expose, and after that decide. It is also interesting to see, you know, the resistance of FKM rubber to carb cleaner, to Moly carb cleaner that I use. And this is FKM rubber, and here I have carb cleaner, here I have EGR cleaner from Moly. Let's see after one day what, you know, will happen to them. Okay, so this was carb cleaner as far as I remember, and as you can see, you know, this is part of this hose. Now it is super soft and it's kind of dissolved a bit. So this is the hose gates, vacuum line hose. I'm not sure about the material, but I can check it. So this is AEM, this is ethylene acrylate rubber. I think that the original hoses are not made from this material. So, but anyway, this is what happens after 24 hours to this one. And this is FPM/FKM rubber, so as you can see, it is softer now, a lot softer than it was, a lot softer, and it's kind of bigger. So as you can see, it looks like this now. so the diameter should be the same everywhere. So this is what happened to that, but it's still kind of okay. And this was in the EJAR cleaner motif, which is very similar to carb cleaner, but also it contains some other hydrocarbons. So as you can see, there is no such effect, or insignificant. I believe probably it is just because, you know, it's evaporated, you know, pretty much completely, but this one hasn't evaporated, so probably it's related to just concentration of the solvent. So this is the reason why you should not use, basically expose your valve cover gasket to such kind of solvents. Another 24 hours passed and it looks a lot better than it was initially. And if I touch it, it's pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same like the good one. So it's pretty much similar, very similar, I would say. I mean, not the good one, but that one which was in the EJAR cleaner. So this was in the carb cleaner. So xylene, actually, it is the main thing which is the ingredient, you know, of those cleaners. And so I would say, yes, it is a bit swollen, but insignificantly. And this is the AEM rubber. It looks also good. As I said, this is not so good quality, so it looks pretty good to me. So I can say that short exposure is kind of okay, but better to avoid it, so seems like. I'm not sure what will happen with that, you know, in several months or something, but it looks pretty good now. Why I'm even, you know, saying about valve cover gasket, it is because, you know, this is the valve cover and this is the intake port. I closed it, but as you can see, it goes through the valve cover, and then there is an edge and head, and between them there we have a gasket which is likely made with the same material like, you know, this one. This is the set of, you know, gaskets for intake manifold. I think it is FKM rubber or probably NBR, and likely the same material is used for valve cover gasket. So it is important, try to not expose, you know, that gasket to solvents, hydrocarbons, you know, brake cleaners, carb cleaners and stuff like that, just to be on the safe side. However, very short exposure is not dangerous. So let's remember how it looks like now. I would say it is pretty good. Pretty good. And those ports are pretty clean. I believe that they're clean just because the EJAR valve is usually opened when it's, you know, like below 2k RPM or something like this. At the same time, in this mode, usually swirl flaps are kind of partially closed, and that's why all that soot from the exhaust, it simply doesn't go much here, but it goes here, and so that it reacts with oil here, and we see that, you know, kind of stuff in the intake. I made some photos of the upper channels, intake runners, and this is the valve. This is how it looks like. So as you can see, it's not that bad, I would say. Everything is oily. This is the intake port itself. So the valve and the port, another valve. This one is even cleaner. Again, not so good quality, but this is the valve, you know, in this cylinder. It's opened now a bit, and as you can see, it's pretty good. I'm going to use 4 bottles of Liqui Moly diesel intake cleaner. let's see how it goes. I'm going to assemble the intake manifold back and try those bottles and see whether it helps. After that, I will unmount the intake manifold again just to inspect. So this is the EGR valve, looks pretty good, and the throttle is clean, just oily a bit. This is how I test the EGR valve. If it's like this and stays like this, it means that it is okay. Make sure that your swirl flaps are not in the engine. A couple of things about how to unmount the intake manifold, kind of tips and tricks. So here it is everything easy. This is the EGR pipe, there is a clamp, simply unscrew it. Here there is also a kind of BMW type clamp. And there are bolts and nuts. So 2 bolts per cylinder on the top and nuts per stud here. The last one is tricky because you need to unclick the common rail pressure regulator valve here, so just push it here and unclick it. It is behind the intake manifold, so it could be a bit tricky, but now you see how it looks like. When you up it, you know, be very careful with these seals, because as you can see, they can easily kind of go out from there and basically fall in your intake port. Also, this pipe you need to disconnect it from the electric valve. This is the valve, and it is kind of, you know, it's fixed in the intake manifold. Here you see someone damaged it before me. Unfortunately not damaged, but yes, I see the, you know, screwdrivers scratches here. You need to disconnect the hose when the intake manifold is mounted here, so be careful with that. So this is the holder, so simply take it out from here and disconnect this hose. Don't forget about intake manifold pressure sensor, so simply disconnect it. Also here, this is the holder for oil dipstick. So oil dipstick, as you can see, the dipstick and its holder and basically nut is from here, so you need to unscrew it. And also there is a holder for vacuum hose. It's also screwed here, so it holds this hose. So inspect the vacuum hose. In my case, you know, this hose is a bit kind of bad here, I need to replace it. Also, when you unscrew nuts from those studs, you need to have some magnet, you know, to keep them. And of course you need to disassemble all the stuff, like when you change the air filter, pretty much similar. Also this wire, you know, in order to disconnect this wire safely, please disconnect the battery. Before installation of this blanking plate, I put some amount of universal sealing compound here. So as you can see, this is high temperature universal seal. Probably those holes are not even anymore, and there is a chance that without the sealing compound it will leak. It is blanked now. This is how it is going to work. So I reinstalled everything here. I put some silicone spray here, just like, you know, like grease. It should work. And also what I noticed is that the surface of my intake manifold is not exactly even, so if I do this, you know, it is moving a bit. I hope you see it. It is definitely not a good thing, but I hope that the seals here, those are new by the way, the seals here will compensate this. So as you can see, I cleaned it. Yes, it's not perfect, but it is enough. Keep in mind, when an intake manifold is placed like this, the EGR pipe is here and the EGR valve is there. I also have, you know, this thing is damaged a bit. I'm not sure how it's happened. Probably I damaged it somehow. Before installation, make sure that, you know, all that stuff is placed perfectly there. So as you can see, I cleaned it not perfectly, but it is absolutely enough. It is absolutely enough. So be careful. That thing, it should not drop. You should not drop in your intake ports, so be very careful with that. I put the intake manifold kind of like this. I haven't screwed it yet, but I checked the seals with the bore scope. So as you can see, they're there. So double check them, because there is a chance that you can drop them in the cylinder. Those nuts are tricky, and I first put nut like this, using long pliers. In my case they're broken, but you can use normal ones. 11mm socket, and now I need to very so as you can see. So I torqued the bolts to the spec, installed this clamp, this connector, this holder. It is here, this hose, vacuum hose. I think it should be the opposite actually, because I don't like how it looks like. Yeah, should be like this. So I will keep it like this for now. So I put this wire here. The bolt, by the way, I think the bolt here is longer. So there are two similar bolts, but this one is longer than that one. So as you can see, that nut is there. That common rail pressure regulator is also installed. This is the map sensor, guys. Don't use brake cleaner here to clean it. I think now it looks better. So better to also replace that rubber grommet there, kind of seal, you know, because in my case it's a bit ripped, but it is going to work. So I believe that, you know, it sits there perfectly. I put some silicone oil there in order to simplify the installation, but I will need to definitely replace that grommet. So I also put, you know, plus cable here. And don't forget about this one, by the way. This is the holder for engine cover. That bolt for strut braces, it is 100 Newton meters, and also you need to turn it to some degree after that, just because it is TTY bolt, but I haven't changed them and I'm not going to do that. So simply 100 Newton meters, 40 Newton meters. Ideally those bolts should be replaced when you install this stuff, so be careful. This one, and this rubber, they should be on their place. Here on the screen, as you can see, it is 90 degrees temperature of the coolant, and also MAF sensor data is interesting. The airflow increases when I inject some amount of cleaner and decreases after that. So it's interesting to spy on that while you are injecting the cleaner. Using the seat position, I can even change the RPM. Now it's a bit higher, now it's a bit lower. So this system actually works. That's why you need wipe here. Here you can have a lot of oil. So I drove around 500 kilometers and unmounted the intake manifold again, and As you can see, let me put some light here. So I will use bore scope to inspect them inside, but I think that carbon buildup now is kind of, smoother a bit. However, it's still there. These channels are very oily now. It is because I blanked swirl flaps and all the oil from intake goes exactly there. I need to inspect why I have so much oil in the intake, so I need to check the crankcase ventilation system and turbocharger, but it's a different topic. As for intake manifold, as you can see, swirl flaps, blanking plates, they don't leak at all, so it's perfect. The manifold itself, it looks pretty good. I have not so good light here, but as you can see, the condition here is pretty much the same like it was when I installed it. Condition there is pretty much the same like it was, so this is the kind of upper intake runners, and as you can see, I checked the first, third and sixth cylinder, and as you can see, valves are pretty clean. And here you see this is the place where kind of air faces the engine head, and it cleaned pretty well. So this intake cleaner, it kind of cleans not all surfaces in even way, right, but it cleans mostly places when it travels the most, like with the airflow. And this kind of scratches, this is what I scratch with my bore scope. So that carbon buildup is pretty light there now. And valves, as you can see, valves are pretty clean. However, from top, I think this is the sixth cylinder, the dirtiest, and from top it looks like it's really dirty. So it worked, and especially valves, I really see some difference, I think. So it actually worked, but not so significant. I think you can use it like for maintenance purposes, once per one bottle per 10k kilometers, something like that. So, and lower channels, they look worse. So as you can see, it's like sludge, like sludge. Just because there is a lot more oil in the lower channels. So as you can see, yeah, it was hard to make good photos, but yeah, especially this one. So a lot of carbon buildup, and also it's like oily now. So yeah, this is how it looks like. When I sprayed, two bottles, one after another, on the second bottle, I think I heard kind of the knocking sound, detonation sound. It's pretty much unnoticeable, but I stopped spraying, and after a couple of minutes it became normal. Don't overspray, and keep an eye on temperature. One thing about performance impact of blanking plates, I haven't noticed significant performance impact. So I think that probably on low RPM the car is kind of smoother now, so it reacts on the gas pedal, you know, kind of a bit slower, but it is very insignificant, and I believe that cleaning of the intake ports would give you, you know, a more significant effect likely. So for me, it is not significant. I haven't noticed significant torque changes on low or, you know, kind of middle RPM. And probably I noticed that the car, you know, is better on high RPM, but again, the difference is very insignificant from my point of view. And also interesting thing about, as I thought about glow plugs, but it turned out it was related to swirl flaps. So before I blanked the swirl flaps, when I started the car first time, you know, in the morning, it was a bit kind of unstable. So you started, everything is okay, and after, you know, like 5 seconds, you know, it was idling and RPM was a bit unstable, kind of. I thought that it was related to kind of, you know, non-working glow plugs, but after blanking the, you know, swirl flaps, I noticed that everything, you know, became okay, and that symptom simply went away. So it was related to swirl flaps. Interesting. Since I'm not satisfied with the results of cleaning, I'm going to try another way. So as you know, the best way is to use walnut blasting here. This is what BMW recommends, but it requires additional equipment, you know, the tool, fall blasting, you know, compressor and stuff like that, and also it requires you to unmount the intake, not the intake, valve cover, just because if you apply walnut blasting as is, you will either damage the gasket between valve cover and engine head, or valve cover in the worst case. I don't think it, you know, makes sense to do it even if you have tools for walnut blasting, unless you are doing some related job, like, you know, injector related or timing chain or something like that. So I'm going to try another way. It's not the best way, but anyway, so I'm going to fill the intake ports with the carburetor cleaner or intake cleaner, and after that I'm going to use pigtails to, you know, do something like this, just because it is safe approach. I know that it's not, you know, it's not the best way, and there is no way to remove all carbon buildup from valves using this approach, especially because of the complicated geometry of intake here. But anyway, I will try it, and after that I will pump the water, not the water, but the cleaner, hydrocarbons actually, from there, and after that I will apply, you know, the air dust remover for computers, and just, you know, vacuum cleaner for cars to remove big carbon buildup from there. So let's see how it goes. I'm going to use EGR cleaner from Moly. It is mixture of organic solvents, and it has, you know, it has long pipe. Long pipe is useful for such ports because I don't want to touch the valve cover and gasket with hydrocarbons from those cleaners, so just to be on the safe side. However, it's small amount, you know, faces the gasket, everything will be okay, likely. Regarding how to make sure that valves are closed, and also how to understand which channels or runners you can clean. So this is 6-cylinder engine, and important thing is that the full you know, cycle for one cylinder, it is 720 degree on the crankshaft. So if we divide it by 6 by cylinders, we will get 120 degree. It is stroke start. So basically every 120 degree, the inline 6 engine, it has the stroke start. It could be either power stroke, or it could be intake stroke, exhaust stroke. So every 120 degree it happens in different cylinders. but we have 4 strokes, and if we divide 720 degrees by 4, we will get 180 degrees, and it is you know, 1 full stroke. So crankshaft rotates 180 degrees for 1 full stroke, either, you know, intake, compression, power stroke, or exhaust. As you can see, there is a difference 60 degrees, so it means that inline 6 engine, it has 60 degree overlap. It is very important for us. Why? Because, as you know, 1 full stroke, it is 180 degree, and if we have overlap, you know, 60 degree here, it means that the first 60 degree of the stroke is overlapped with the, you know, one cylinder, and the last 60 degrees of the stroke is overlapped with another cylinder, right? And it means that likely we will have 2 open intake valves. I mean, it is easier to find position of the crankshaft, sorry, when you have 2 open intake valves. And if you have 2 open intake valves, it means that other intake valves are closed, so you can safely clean 4 cylinders out of 6. And yes, of course, you can find the position when you can clean, you know, 5 cylinders. However, it is trickier, and in our, you know, shade tree environment, going this way, it is kind of, you know, easier. I have this picture from Wikipedia, and this is inline 6 engine like on BMW, and firing order here is the first cylinder. It is the cylinder on near timing chain, so it is, if you see on the car, you know, if you're staying on the front of the car, this will be the first cylinder, you know. So the firing order is the first cylinder, 5th, 3rd, 6th, 2nd, and 4th, and it illustrates, you know, pretty well everything that I said. So as you can see, you see the 1 stroke, it is 180 degrees, and the full cycle for 1 cylinder is 720 degrees. And here it is very easy on this particular, you know, image. It is very easy to see the overlap. So let's spy, for instance, on this cylinder. It is 5th cylinder. So as you can see, let's, you know, this one, it is intake, compression, power stroke, exhaust. Remember the colors: intake, compression, power stroke, exhaust. And as you can see, this cylinder, it overlaps always with the first one and third one, match the similar colors. So for instance, let's take the intake. So as you can see, intake, it is 60 degree overlap. So spy on them. I mean, intake. As you can see on this picture, it is very clear. Intake. So last 60 degrees here of intake means first 60 degrees here of intake. So intake. And it means that last, you know, degrees of intake here, it overlaps with third one. So as you can see, let's wait for the intake last, intake first, you know. So it means that when you crank the crankshaft, likely you will have 2 opened intake valves. Like in my case, I'm cleaning now 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th. So, and this one and that one, they have opened intake valve. So as you can see, This is the third cylinder, and as you can see, intake valve is clearly opened, and it is opened pretty much a lot. It means that it is end here of the stroke, and it means that the sixth cylinder is going to, you know, open the intake valve soon. And this is the sixth cylinder, and as you can see, it is open. So you see that darkness near the valve, so it means that it's opened. It comes from the cylinder. And in that cylinder, in the fifth one, I have now, you know, it is cleaner. So it is safe to, you know, clean them both, you know, the upper kind of channel and the side channel. They are named differently actually, but I named them, you know, upper and side channel. By the way, this is what I get after, like, you know, I mean 4 or 5 rounds of cleaning. It is very easy to see, you know, my state here. So see this one, intake, intake. So last 60 degrees here, it means intake also here. So this is kind of my state. And after that you need to, you know, rotate the crank shaft again to clean, you know, third and sixth actually. You don't care what is the stroke, you care only that it is not intake. Spy on valve's position, you know, carefully, just because otherwise all that stuff, you know, will go to the cylinder, which I believe is not an issue, just because in this case the oil sump is made from aluminum and it's not painted, so likely nothing will happen, but you will need to change the oil after that. And also in my case, you know, I don't have glow plugs, that's why it's easier for me to crank the crankshaft. This is how the oil sump looks like. So as you can see, it's not painted, it is some, you know, used one. How to check whether the intake valve is closed or not. So I put bore scope here, and as you can see, now the valve is closed. I'm turning the crankshaft, you know, in that direction, using just E12. I don't have that special, you know, BMW thing to crank it, but since I'm doing, you know, also glow plug job, now I don't have glow plugs installed, so that's why there is no compression and it's very easy to turn it. So it's not a problem. However, yeah, it's a bit inconvenient. So I'm going to rotate it, you know, like this, as you can see, and here. So rotation, 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 rotation. As you can see, it's closed. Rotation, 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 rotation. Yeah, so as you can see, it is going to open now. It is going to be closed. And rotate a couple of times. So now it's closed. When I rotate it here, by the way, be careful when you pull the wrench to not damage the radiator. When I rotate it here, I feel that you know, E12 bolt, it doesn't go. I mean, it's not enough torque to move it. So you are good here. So now I'm confident that this valve is closed, so it means that, you know, the first cylinder, this and this valves are closed. I unmounted the radiator fan. It's pretty much, you know, easy. So one torques, you know, here, and another one which keeps the heat exchanger. So another one is there. And basically also wire on top, and here there is also, you know, some plastic holder. This is the plastic holder, so be careful when you're unmounting it. And of course, as you can see, I unmounted the engine cover, so you need to up the car and unmount the engine cover. And let's remember how it looks like. So as you can see, a lot of carbon buildup, but it's kind of soft. The next step is to, spray carburetor cleaner there. So basically spray it exactly inside, like this. So I put a lot of carburetor cleaner there, and then this is the pigtails, as you can see. I read, on some forum some guy did that on different engine, but the idea was the same, and I really like it just because, it really helps you to do that. So basically do something like this. Here this is the pump, and I'm going to pump everything what's inside. So let's see how it goes. This is what was there previously. So as you can see, carb cleaner here, and this is the third time. Now I'm waiting for carb cleaner to basically dissolve the carbon buildup. So this was after the first time. So as you can see, it actually works. Okay, so I'm waiting now. So I spent a lot of time, I think like half of the day. I tried to clean it using the pigtails, carb cleaner, EGR cleaner. So basically this stuff, because it's pretty cheap in my place, and I had also those bottles from my previous cleaning for another car. So I thought that initially that such kind of stuff can really work well for carbon buildup, because previously I also used them to clean the carbon buildup from other places, and actually it works. But carbon buildup on the valves, it is especially hard, and it's very hard to clean it properly. For places like this, carb cleaner works perfectly, just because even if you have some small pieces of carbon buildup, like in my case, it's not going to affect the performance of the car, just because such intake channels and the intake manifold, they act more like a receiver. If you have stuff like this, if it's long and you think that you can use it, no, I wouldn't recommend you, just because you can lose that kind of small metal, and if you skip it, it will be disaster, or probably not, but anyway, it is dangerous. Better to use something like plastic there. So this is how it looks like now. So as you can see, the channels, runners themselves are pretty clean. However, the valve, you see a lot of carbon buildup here. It looks a bit kind of wet, but actually it's very hard. And here. However, as you can see, this area, for instance, I think just because of the pigtails, this is the upper channel. It was very clogged, by the way. I mean, the runner itself. And this is the side channel, swirl flap channel, So as you can see, let's compare it with the other ports, two ports which I haven't cleaned yet. This is third cylinder. This is third, head port kind of. And sixth. Interesting thing is that, head port for the sixth cylinder, the valve is pretty clean. However, there are a lot of carbon buildup, which is, when I put the bore scope here, it becomes dirty and it tends to drop. So I was careful, but I think I dropped a couple of small pieces on the valve. So what do you think? Whether it's okay or not? So there is definitely some effect, right? But not so significant, but it is there. So this is after cleaning. Compare it before and after. Before, after. Quality is bad, sorry, but before, after. I decided to make a test, so I put some small amount of carb cleaner and I'm gonna wait for 24 hours. So guys, 22 hours passed, and as you can see, this is the result. So it is definitely better. I haven't applied, any physical cleaning. It is definitely better, I would say. And this is the upper channel. This is again another cylinder side channel. So I see some result, but I decided to try another method. So this is the ATF oil and this is the pure acetone. I mixed them, 50-50 ratio and put to the cylinder, to the runner on the valve. I used this kind of tool, to fill the upper runners, just because I don't want acetone to contact with gasket and head cover. So after some experiments, I realized that actually weighting works, but without physical cleaning, you can't get good result. So you could get acceptable result, but in order to get a better result, you need to apply some physical cleaning. So what works from solvents, it is pure acetone, and Matip carb cleaner, it is mixture of organic solvents, and also ATF oil also works. If you mix it with acetone, it kind of helps acetone to evaporate slower, and I also did that. But regarding physical cleaning, I finally did something like this. So it just pigtails. So it is safe because it's kind of plastic, and when you rotate it, it creates kind of plastic dust, which you can remove using carb cleaner and pump. It looks kind of like this, and it works pretty well. By the way, when you rotate it, the temperature increases here, and it could be pretty hot. One thing I noticed about them, when you rotate them using the drill, the temperature rises and they become softer, and that's why they kind of bend in different directions, and after that you can lose these actually things, and this is what happens after that. So as you can see, I lost them in the intake channel, intake runner, and as you can see, I lost 3 of them. But to be honest, it's pretty easy to take them out from intake runners if you have bore scope, so no worries about that. But anyway, so as you can see, and I really like the result. So you see, just see, oh, this is the previous photo. So this is what I have now. First cylinder, second cylinder. So this is the first one, second one, third one. No, not the third one, fourth one, and fifth one. So fifth, fourth, second one. So as you can see, I really like this result, guys, so I'm satisfied and I'm going to stop right now. Also, I made a small test, I took the mix, I think 80% of acetone and 20% of ATF, and I put these things for 24 hours there, and as you can see, this is from the very cheap, vacuum cleaner, and I put this part. So as you can see here, plastic is kind of hard, but here, now it is really soft. So basically acetone kind of dissolved this plastic stuff, as you can see. This is super cheap plastic. Also, I took the rubber from my glove, and it looks pretty good to me. I tried to, kind of do something like this, and so it looks pretty much the same. And interesting thing is this gasket. This is damaged one, and as you can see, BMW FPM, it is the material, and I think that the same material is used for valve cover gasket, and as you can see, after 24 hours it's pretty good. So I don't think that something is wrong with that. 24 hours, guys, in 80% acetone and 20% ATF. As you can see, it's perfect. This is the same gasket, but it wasn't in acetone. So if I actually, I think it is a bit softer now, this one, but it doesn't look like something is wrong with that. So I'm going to spy on it, and let's see what will happen in one additional day. For upper channels or swirl channels, I created, this kind of thing to put it there to kind of position the pigtails properly, and also to not touch the gasket between engine head and valve cover. Here I use 9 pigtails like this, or 9 or 10. I position them until they, touch the valve, and then do this. When you feel that they're too soft, change them. So in my case, it's enough, like for 1 minute. After that, they become too soft and I need to replace them. So I take, those pigtails and I tried this rubber. So as you can see, this is the dust. So this is FPM or FKM rubber, and this is what happened to it after 30 seconds of, kind of cleaning or drilling. So pretty much similar could happen to the gasket between valve cover and engine head. So this is exactly the reason why you need something like this to kind of direct the pigtails, However, even if something like this happens, it's not a big deal, I think, and likely gasket is going to work, but better to avoid it, of course. So this is the result. After 5 cleaning attempts, it was like this. Now it's like this, so as you can see. So 5 times 1 minute, for pigtails, and this is the result. When you complete the cleaning, you need to, use compressed air to remove, some big stuff from there, and after that, vacuum cleaner. Forget about this thing, it simply doesn't work. I can show you. So it creates good pressure in the very beginning, and it's like, and now the pressure is lower, so it's like 2 bars, I think, at maximum. Yeah, that's it. So it doesn't work. The same thing with such vacuum cleaners, so they're not powerful, so probably you can remove something using them, but it doesn't work. What works is real compressor, so I have here 8 bars, you know, so as you can see, 8 bars, and I'm going to, you know, just clean using that. And the next step is vacuum cleaner, and I put, you know, this small pipe here in order to put it inside, so it will remove, you know, the remaining stuff from there. Now they even visually it looks better. So I haven't cleaned this place just because I don't want to put solvents on the gasket, but as you can see, it's pretty perfect. Yeah, it has some, but it's very minor. I'm not going to clean it. So as you can see, gasket is there and it looks good. Same here. And here we go. This is how it looks like now. So swirl and tangential ports, you know. As you can see, that small, you know, small white stuff, it is pieces of pigtails, and it's very hard to vacuum them from there, but they're very soft, so it should not lead to any issues. As you can see also on the valve, you know, so it's minor. So as you can see, yeah, I think I probably need to remove it completely from here, but again, this is plastic and I don't believe that it could lead to some issues. I mean, sometimes, you know, pieces of soot, you know, they behave the same way, especially when you use some intake cleaners or something, so should not, or walnut blasting, you know, also kind of these small pieces of walnuts will be there definitely. So I consider it as a perfect result. The only thing which is not cleaned is valve cover, but the same would be even with walnut blasting if you don't unmount it. And as you can see, it's not that bad. So, okay, I will play a bit with vacuum cleaner, rotate the crankshaft and switch to another valves. Before we move to another 2 cylinders, so 2 days passed after acetone event, you know, and now it is again, it is very hard, so it changed color, but it's hard. But this thing is kind of soft, but this thing is very hard. I think it's brittle now, likely. So this was in the acetone and it feels pretty good. The same like the good one, you know. And if I take another one, so pretty much the same, guys. So we can say that short exposure to acetone and I guess to other hydrocarbons, to most of them, for instance aliphatic hydrocarbons, likely it won't damage your valve cover gasket. So this is the 3rd cylinder, I think. And this is the, I think, so 6 and 3rd cylinder, they look similar. I think this is the 6, so you see the valve a bit here, so it's dirty. I decided to soak it a couple of times for 5 minutes in carb cleaner, in mixture of organic solvents, as you know, for like 5 minutes, and after that I will soak it in the acetone plus ADF for like 2-3 hours, and after that I will clean it using carb cleaner, and after that switch to my pigtails technique, and after that again clean, and let's see. So I'm not going to wait, you know, for days. So seems like it doesn't work when I soak it only for 3 hours. So I tried to clean it using the pigtails technique, and yes, it works, but the result is not so good, you know, so that's why I soaked it again, you know, in acetone plus ATF for 24 hours. So it seems like in 24 hours it really, you know, becomes kind of soft, and pigtails really work in this case. So as you can see, unfortunately quality is bad, but runner, again, the intake runner itself is good, but carbon buildup on valve, you know, it's very hard and it requires time to dissolve it. What works better than the bottle is kind of this pipe, you know, it works perfectly for swirl channels, for upper channels. In order to keep it in place, you know, I decided to put the pigtails like this and it keeps it. So it is very shade tree, I understand, but it works. Another test. So this is again FPM rubber, likely, or probably AEM or something like this. So this is aftermarket gasket for the intake manifold. So it was for several hours or even more in the acetone and ATF oil, and after that 2 days passed and I touch it and it's pretty good. I mean, it's pretty much the same like it was, so no issues with that at all. So that being said, we can conclude that valve cover gasket won't be damaged if the exposure is short to organic solvents like acetone. And one thing to note here, do not use chlorinated hydrocarbons. So if you know, see something like unflammable carb cleaner or brake cleaner, do not use them, just because chlorinated hydrocarbons are a lot more aggressive, so be careful. One thing which really helps for this approach when you you know, spin the pigtails inside such kind of hose, you know, is to use, you know, silicone spray. If you silicone spray inside, it will, you know, simplify movement of the pigtails, and it works pretty well. So I recommend you, if you use, you know, small diameter hose here, just put some silicone spray inside. Okay, so I'm done cleaning. So this is the 6-cylinder tangential port. This is the swirl port, 3rd cylinder and 3rd cylinder again. So as you can see, it's not perfect in this case. It's not exactly perfect, to be honest, but it's a lot better than it was. So yeah, it looks like this. So I use different pigtails for other cylinders, and these pigtails are kind of smaller and softer, and that's why the result is a bit worse, but I believe it is acceptable result, especially if I compare with the initial, you know, state of the valves. But if you do this job, you know, make sure that pigtails are, you know, kind of stiff, so you need to have something which is stiff. So I completed the cleaning, and I also used air and vacuum cleaner to remove, you know, the dust and stuff like that, and some, you know, kind of remaining stuff from cleaning and pigtails. And also, as a final step, I used, you know, this thing only here, you know, on top of those channels, kind of before the gasket, you know, to clean the carbon buildup here, to clean the biggest carbon buildup. So now I consider that it's cleaned. So as you can see, now it looks a lot better here. So pretty much super clean, you know. So, and that cylinder is hard to show, and the same with those cylinders. So it's super clean now. This is how it looked like, you know, after vacuum cleaner and air. So it's pretty perfect, I would say. This is 6 and 3rd cylinders. So the next step, since as you know my glow plugs are not installed, I'm going to kind of try to start the engine in order to remove all this stuff from the cylinder, if any, just in case. So I simply press the start button, you know, and after 1 second I will stop it. And that's it, I think it's enough. I recommend you to disconnect the injectors before you crank the engine, just to not to inject the fuel there, and of course don't forget to remove that thing. And some random photos after I cranked the engine a bit. So as you can see, it looks pretty perfect, and they're all in a kind of, you know, similar condition. Yes, there are, you know, some places where the carbon buildup is still there. This valve is opened, but anyway, the result is pretty good, especially if you compare with what was here before, you know. So I like the result. I also found, you know, this hose holder for the intake manifold, so it was broken in my case, so looks great, and it has very interesting design. Regarding torque specs, so this is M6 bolt and it is 8 Newton meters, and those nuts here, they are M7, you know, and the torque here is 13 Newton meters. So double check it, it's pretty easy to find it in the internet, but 8, 13, it is very important because it's plastic, and do not over torque it. I will also perform oil change, just because it's time for oil change, but actually it's not needed. However, if you know, overfilled a couple of times, you know, intake ports, or if you are not sure if something in the cylinder, then, you know, better to change the oil. And also, if something goes into the cylinder, you know, like solvent, because valve was not closed, or, you know, you did a mistake or something like that, the easiest way is to unscrew the glow plug and basically crank the engine without that glow plug. So as I said, I recommend you to replace this grommet and use silicone oil to install it, and if it is in a good condition and you're not going to replace it anyway, remove it before cleaning the intake manifold, because you know, solvents will likely damage it. One thing about cleaning also, do not overfill intake ports, just because, you know, first of all, in this case you can overfill and expose the gasket to solvents, which is not desirable, as I said, and also another thing, there are valve guides, and also, you know, solvent can go to the valve guides and basically remove the oil from there, which is completely not desirable. So just put, when you soak it in the solvent, just put a bit of solvent and you would be okay. So just cover the valve and do not, you know, soak the guides. Another thing about cleaning, so probably you're wondering, what if solvent could potentially damage the valve? The answer is highly unlikely, no, just because valve material is, as far as I know, it is chrome silicon steel, and I haven't heard that you know, any solvents like xylene or acetone or, you know, aliphatic hydrocarbons, that they can damage you know, that valve. So no worries about that. I should have answered this question, you know, in the very beginning of the video, but in case if you have it, so no worries about that. There will be another video about replacing the glow plugs, and as part of that video I will finally assemble everything and start the engine and see how it behaves with the clean intake ports. But anyway, please subscribe and leave a comment, ask questions, whatever you want, guys. Thank you.